Hello, all. Hello to those of you that are joining us live, and for those of you that are watching this back, welcome. Jo Palmer here. I'm one half of the connection table, and we were just talking offline that we could not believe that it has been 12 months since we ran a session around this fellowship 12 months ago. And we're here again, and I'm very, very excited to have the crew from the Country Education Foundation. I'm going to welcome you both to introduce yourselves to everyone to talk about the Tim Fischer Fellowship. I'm very excited. How are you both?
Really well. Thanks so much for having us, Jo. I'm Wendy Mason. I'm the CEO of Country Education Foundation, here with my colleague.
Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm Head of Community and Development with Country Education Foundation.
And we're both excited as well. So thanks for having us. It's a great opportunity to get the word out about the Tim Fischer Fellowship.
Okay, well, let's go, because we're going to have some people that are rolling in fresh for the first time that haven't come across CEF. They haven't come across the fellowship. They might not have come across it explicitly, but they may have without realizing it. So do you want to give us a bit of an overview of CEF to start with, and then we can sort of go into the fellowship in more detail?
Yeah, sure. So Country Education Foundation was established in Boorowa, Central New South Wales, over 33 years ago. There was a community who recognised that the young people at that time really needed some support to really get themselves on an education pathway after school. So from that small genesis that then became a local foundation, those volunteers banded together, raised some money and granted to about, I think, 5 initial young people aged 16 to 24 who had a pathway that they wanted to pursue after school. And so the genesis of the idea of Country Education Foundation came from there. It's grown. We now have nearly 50 local foundations, and Lisa and I are in the national team, the professional services team that supports those nearly 50 local foundations who are made up still of volunteers in local communities across Australia. So it's a very grassroots driven, local intel. We kind of provide now, we've grown to have a bigger team. We're still pretty lean, but certainly to support those fundraising and awareness raising and supporting students' efforts that the local foundations employ every day. Tim Fischer was our first patron, so that's the connection. In some respects, this fellowship it honours his values of honesty, integrity. He really believed in rural and regional communities having solutions. He knew that people, country people didn't need to have government or anyone come in and solve stuff for them. We have no government funding, so we are fully funded through donation. And so that legacy of, I suppose, being reasonably entrepreneurial about that whole finding solutions and supporting young people with the real understanding that actually they're the potential for rural and regional communities. We now support about 900 students across Australia. Many of them, they could be doing anything from barista to a builder to a brain surgeon, so it's not just university, but certainly many of them are on pathways where they will be returning to rural and regional communities, and we know that it has impacts for them, for their families and for the community. So, without delving too deeply into the fellowship, that's a little bit of a spiel. Want to add anything about our efforts?
So it is really a grassroots organisation. We have the nearly 50 foundations run by over 450 volunteers. They do the work at the local level, fundraising, finding students and supporting those students through grants and through their support. So it's very much on reimbursement, and then the committee follows the students through their pathway for that year. And then nationally, we work really hard to find extra opportunities that we can top up that funding through placement, with university co-funding, vocational co-funding. So it's a process that these students are supported throughout their study, and then we have alumni services at the end. So we really want to keep track of these students because they're quite important to us.
Yeah. So it's the funding. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I interrupted you. It's the kind of funding and the belief and the support as a mix that kind of surrounds this young person. And so that's important. It's not just a grant, it's not just a check, here you go. I think that kind of understanding what a young person wants to do, backing them. Sometimes they may not have anyone around them who has had the opportunity of any kind of further education. And so you don't know what you don't know. So there's an aspiration piece that comes through our volunteer network. It's a really powerful model. I've worked in the social sector all my career, and the intel and the social capital we have at that local level is quite remarkable. We had a conference not so long ago. The people in the room, they come together at that local level to really know who needs the support, and they actually make sure those young people, often are encouraging them to apply and supporting them from there. So, yeah, sorry to interrupt, Jo, but I just thought that...
I was just going to say, I think that this is also, I know we're here to talk about the fellowship specifically, but I think it's a really interesting insight into the organisation, because I just wanted to clarify. So my understanding is these grants that students can apply for is like a stipend. It can go towards rent, it can go towards fuel to get to uni or to TAFE or to whatever. Like, it's not actually tied to explicit things that they need to spend it on. It is just them as the whole
educational expenses
and living away. Yeah.
So that really does talk to us being able to respond well to their needs. So if they do need to catch public transport, if they do need to have petrol money, diesel money, if they do need to actually stay in accommodation one day a week when they're at TAFE away from home, there's things, if they do need to move from home altogether, certainly, and the reimbursement model is powerful too, because it actually does mean that money doesn't go straight into their bank account. There's not a sugar hit. There's also some accountability, some budgeting, and some really, I suppose, mentoring that happens at that fairly pragmatic level.
of life skills and managing a budget.
Yeah.
Right.
And, grants kind of range from as a minimum as $1,000 through to multiple thousands of dollars. And as Lisa says, often the grantee at that local level will receive additional funding through our efforts as well. So the money's important, but so are all the other parts that come together. And I think, it's something that's worked for 33 years. We're growing. We're expanding into WA, which is really pleasing. We really want to be truly a national organisation. But certainly we've got champions in nearly 50 communities. And we are supporting an age group. So the fellowship is a little bit different. We are supporting those that are aged 16 to 25. I said 24. Well, I've had a holiday recently. 25. The fellowship is really anyone over 18. So that is a bit of a difference. And so we'll get to perhaps talking about that in a moment. But,
okay. Before we wrap up the CEF as a big overarching thing, because you are talking to a crowd of movers and shakers across rural Australia, is there the opportunity for people are you happy if they are reaching out with what does it look like with replicating this at a foundation level in their community? Are you always looking for new communities that would be happy to do that?
Yeah. And I would preface that by saying that really, to be truly grassroots led, there does need to be the social capital, and a community does need to have a few things that make it viable, our proposition. They need to have enough young people. They need to actually have some kind of economy and opportunity, because the fundraising piece needs to actually, and really committees are usually made up of a real cross-section of the community. There could be a bus driver, there could be a school teacher, there could be a business owner, there could be a doctor, all kind of involved in a committee, a whole lot of different people who are across the spectrum, I suppose. We need to have someone, the model works when we've got a viable community who get it, who understand that there's a need for their local young people. They know that there's a gap. So quite often we find that we're working with communities that aren't large communities, but they're not too small either. So it's kind of, there are a few demographic and pieces of the mix that need to be kind of present, but then there also needs to be a champion. There needs to be locals who are prepared to really put the yakka in. We've got a lot of scaffolding. We will help with model constitutions, supporting all kinds of financials. We have DGR status. We will help a community establish a local foundation, which is essentially an association
Incorporation.
incorporation through their state or territory authority. And we kind of believe that there needs to be sustainable growth. We are adding, but we certainly don't want to set up foundations in areas where they then fall apart fairly quickly. So it's a long play. And this stuff does take some time quite often, but certainly we are very open to any conversation with anyone who sees the need in their local community. There are some resources on our website around establishing a foundation, but certainly reaching out to Lisa Rye is also on the cards as well.
Well, I will make sure that we share all of the goodies with this recording so that people can come back to it. Now, for those of you who are not into politics and not from the Riverina, do you want to do a bit of a backstory, who those that may not have come across Tim Fischer in their orbit?
Yeah, so I mean, there is a bit of a demographic thing about Tim Fischer. Tim Fischer was a politician. He was the Deputy Prime Minister, I should say, and the leader of the Nationals for quite some time. He had a real belief in. He's a boy that grew up he went to Borey Creek Public School, so he's kind of, he's had a small town. He had the opportunity to go to boarding school in Melbourne, and in one of the books I've read about him, he kind of really talks about education being such a powerful disruptor, I suppose, or enabler of potential. He had the opportunity, right? He was certainly, I'm sure, he was an amazing character. Neurodiverse is what I'm sure he would be. His wife would, who's now our patron, would completely say that he operated in a world where he just had so many amazing, great ideas. He did a lot of good things too, I think, as a politician. It wasn't just great ideas. He actually managed to get things done. I think he operated in an era when there was bipartisan kind of things happened. People worked together. He certainly was involved with John Howard when it came to the guns buyback, lots of other things. I mean, if you kind of do a Google, I'm sure you could find. He kind of went from being a politician to not being a politician fairly quickly because one of his sons had been diagnosed, was on the spectrum, and really had quite significant needs that he felt. I think he told a story about arriving home, and his son at the time was only fairly young, and he was scared of him, didn't really know who he was. And that caused him, there's quite a few conversations. Judy Brewer, also his wife, if you want to kind of catch up on, and Richard Weiler or Sarah, I'm not sure who did the interview, but certainly there are some good conversations about him. He was our first patron. And so that whole kind of concept of understanding rural and regional people, understanding that education was key, understanding that there were huge challenges around access for further education for many in the bush and out of capital cities, and really wanting to do something practical about that. He certainly signed up, I think, fairly easy from what I understand, as a patron. And then he went off to he worked at the Vatican, and I don't remember his exact title.
I don't recall it.
But he was the Australian representative to the Vatican at some point, and then came back after that, and then took on being a patron again. As I say, his widow, Judy Brewer, is now our patron. So that legacy of the Fischer family supporting our endeavour is an ongoing one. And I think the fellowship tries to honour him in terms of just not he used to be able to see problems, but he could also see what might be a possible solution, and he'd advocate for that and get things moving. So he was a politician perhaps of calibre that may not be that common these days, is probably how I put that diplomatically.
Yeah. So if you were at a pitch night and you were pitching the fellowship, how's the spiel go?
Well, I think the spiel goes really that it's honouring the legacy of our patron, Tim Fischer, by championing opportunity, curiosity, and the power of community, but also the power of education. So the fellowship this year, we're looking for individuals who have a really good idea about something that they've seen as a challenge in a rural and regional community. They could be coming from lots of different sectors, lots of different insights. We're not married at all to what their background is. But really we're wanting to support someone who can see a challenge, can see that with $50,000, some mentoring, some networking, some connection in, they can actually get a project in the world with our support. So we're really looking for those that are passionate about kind of not just seeing problems, but can see a solution and may have been mulling on that for a while. So we're looking for doers. It's a kind of year-long commitment. It's not, clearly it's not going to be, okay, you're going to solve world peace. There needs to be kind of a tangible scope. And we're looking to also incorporate an education component this year, which is a little bit different from last year. That education component is a very broad, we're not thinking just of schools or universities. We're thinking that there could be a training element, there could be a mentoring element, there could be something that's happening that's actually making sure the impact of the project is felt through that education component, I suppose.
So I have one question straight up, which I think there was a few people that had messaged couldn't dial in today, was around, does this need to be a new project? Does this need to be something that you are just kicking off, or could it be something that you've been ticking away with? Can it be an established sort of business that's working on a key project or outcome or?
Yeah, so let me just read the eligibility quickly, just so we can frame some of that. You have to be an Australian resident, 18 years or older, be passionate about supporting rural and regional communities, be willing to represent CEF as an ambassador, have a strong vision and commitment to your area of study, work or interest, and they're kind of the main bits. So there does not need to be completely brand new. You may have done some kind of pilot and you need to go to the next stage. You may have done a bit of tinkering and now need $50,000. So I suppose no is the short answer to that. It does not need to be. We're supporting an individual, and this is where it gets kind of interesting. So, if you're tied to another institution, we kind of have managed to work that out so far, but there's certainly an element of, it is an application coming from an individual. We are prepared to pay for wages, for travel, for accommodation. That's all in the program guidelines. People should go and have a really good look there. But also, I suppose we're trying to keep this a fairly lean, it's unlike maybe a government grant. You're not going to have to produce a 20-page budget outline. It's trying to kind of, I think, probably the important part is to articulate, I think, the problem, your suggested solution. You will need to upload a bio and a video. But also there is a timeline and a budget piece there, but it's pretty lean. So we're trying to keep it to more of a pitch kind of thing rather than a really long form application process that you might have gone through, for government funding perhaps. I don't know if that's fair to say, but yeah.
Well, we've got actually a fabulous question in the chat here. What are some of the general feedback that you could give to potential applicants based on what you saw in applications last year? Were they mostly aligned, underdeveloped in certain areas, etc.?
So I think the first thing is having a really good idea, like actually being able to articulate the idea and what is the problem you're trying to solve. Some of it is actually really it's a clear communication exercise in some respects because there is a word limit on what you're going to be able to pitch to us. Being clear on that.
Yep. I think a level of clarity. We did have some people that had lots of great ideas. So if you narrow it down to be clear about the problem and clear about the solution.
Certainly there's a criteria matrix that we'll be using that kind of just goes, okay, are you eligible? So that's part of the judging process. And then looking at, I think, probably the methodology around how you'll tackle the problem. So really looking at your project outline, looking at what your objectives will be, how you'll kind of be able to think, right, are we going to be successful? So it's not long form, but there is certainly an expectation that you can cover off some of the, what's the problem? What are you going to do to address it? How's it look in terms of timelines and activity? And how much money roughly were you going to kind of thinking about in terms of where you'll need to allocate funding?
I think there is also an overarching uniqueness So we're trying to find something that's a bit bold and a bit different rather than a replication of something that's already been completed.
Well, do you want to talk to Annabelle Hudson, who was the inaugural recipient of the fellowship last year? Do you want to talk to what her project was? Because that sort of might set the scene, and maybe even touch on what some of the finalists, what they were doing. Because I was very lucky that I got to head up to Sydney and attend the awards ceremony at Parliament House last year, and it was just like, it was amazing to see, hear what Annabelle was working on, but also to hear about the variety of the other finalists as well. So do you want to maybe give a bit of an overview, because that could be quite helpful in seeing if people are if this is their bag or not?
Yeah, sure. So Annabelle, so she's doing a master's in psychology at the moment, but her project is she's developing a program she's calling True North, and that is really quite a practical program that's going to help regional students about year 9, 10. I think year 10 is actually where she's honed in on, to recognise their strengths and build their confidence and really make informed education and career decisions. So she's bringing together, there's variability in that career counselling space across rural and regional Australia. Some students will get a very good experience, will have potentially a good teacher or a good counsellor, but it is pretty variable. So she did quite a good scan and understood that what she also wanted to really focus on, she had the insight that a friend of hers who's now come a bit later to an education pathway to become a teacher, at school she just didn't have any mindset or any kind of frame around the fact that she could herself also become a teacher or could become a teacher. Annabelle's kind of gone on a, so she's using her, I think, insights around the mindset piece and some of the psychology pieces that she's bringing to the project. She's developed some tools, and she's actually now really working on how she'll roll those out to be able to ensure that there are year 10 people that have some access to not just a skills-based questionnaire, but some of the other parts that kind of come into, I think, a program that helps young people really have a bit of direction. And it's just to take a step. It's not necessarily to think, okay, I know I'm going to be at X for the rest of my life, because that's probably unrealistic for any young person at the moment. But it's actually it's really an action kind of orientated planning type of moving them out of being frozen. Quite often they're making subject choices, they're deciding on certain pathways at that point that are really quite critical. So to actually be able to help with a program that helps them, guides them with some, True North is kind of that whole idea of at least you've got some stuff that's going to help you stick to and get to a next step or 2 or 3.
I think what's really interesting is she's focusing and getting the students to get the framework of what they enjoy, what's important to them, and how you redirect that potentially to a career pathway, rather than saying, this is what I want to be, is that suitable for my personality?
Yeah, so that's kind of, and so she, it was really quite a difficult decision last year. We did have some really powerful finalists, and we actually had some very powerful applications. So it was not an easy, it was the first time we had come together to offer this fellowship. So last year we had people from across a number of kind of different, certainly sectors. So we had people from the ag sector, a couple of people from health.
We had health, and we had an interesting character who wanted to do a videography program supporting rural fire services. So he was wanting to capture, so it would all sorts of tools.
That's
programs.
right. That's right. So I think the thing that we have introduced this year as a little bit of a, I suppose, a defining on the funnel is the education component. So, and that when we say education, I'll say that, make sure I say it again. So we're looking for people with practical ideas that address real challenges in country communities, whether that's in agriculture, health, education, science, technology, the arts, or other sectors, provided their project includes an education element, whether they're through communities, workplaces, youth, students, or other educational contexts. and delivers some lasting benefit for that community, for rural and regional Australia. So it's not, you don't have to be a teacher.
And you don't have to be at school.
You don't have to be at school. Yeah. You know, so when we say education, it is literally
it's not formal education.
Automatically.
Yeah.
No. You could be a teacher, but it's not automatically. Yeah.
Okay. It could also be educating. I'm just thinking about some of our members. Could it be an education lens for someone helping to support, you know, PR and marketing for small, hyper local businesses in a community to help stimulate business growth in a main street? Okay.
So if it's a business so if your content's business, it's actually around that whole, it's really about capability building. How are you going to make sure it's not just you that delivers a project to no one? It's actually about your beneficiaries and how you get to that. So it's really about the training, education, capability building, whatever you want to kind of think about, that will actually deliver an outcome for those recipients or beneficiaries, essentially. So what we want to see is not just one person benefiting from the opportunity. There needs to be flow through for a community.
Yeah, great. Love it. Is a broader geographic reach necessarily preferable to hyperlocal, or is it based on merit of the idea and anticipated outcomes?
I think it's the latter. So it's not necessarily, we're not saying it has to be national. We're not saying it has to be, it's really about what do you want to do? Yeah. I think the idea is paramount to success, to be honest. It's really, you've got to have a good idea. You've got to kind of establish that there's a gap. And I think that's important. So the other thing is you're probably more likely to, articulating the gap and trying to be clear on where you know that there's a challenge, that should not be a whole proposal at all, but there's certainly a sharpness around that. And certainly, as I suppose with a lot of funders, we're keen to not just be doing something that's already been done down the road. So the innovation lens on, it might be done down the road, but actually the reason why it's not working down the road is because of X, Y, Z. I would like to try ABC. It's the kind of problem statement that I think would help frame a very good application.
Great.
Yeah.
Now, if we hang on, I'm just letting some more people in. If you've got any people that have dialed in live, if you've got any more questions, jump in here. But if you can talk us through, what does the sort of application process and timeline look like?
You've got time, but you need to get your skates on. So it's kind of time to start getting serious. Go to the website. We're using the Smarty Grants platform to actually take the applications this year, but the program guidelines are there on the website page. So cef.org.au, you'll come to a Tim Fischer Fellowship page if you click through. Applications close at 5 p.m. on the 24th, beg your pardon, 24th, that's Friday, isn't it? Tuesday.
Yeah, we weren't doing a weekend.
I really have had a holiday. Tuesday, sorry, 5 p.m. And so if you head to where all that stuff is, you can certainly register with Smarty Grants. It's a fairly, I don't know if people have used that before. I'm assuming probably people have. It's a platform that we've built our form there. If you have any technical issues, certainly get in contact with the Smarty Grant team. We have had no one have any trouble so far. And really it's about, I think, kind of backing yourself. You know, you don't get a fellowship unless you, and I hope we've tried to keep it pretty tight around the requirement. There'll be a judging panel. The interviews will be held in Sydney. This is important. On the 8th of October, if you're a finalist, you'll be invited to interview in Sydney. There'll be a dinner that night. The announcement will be made the following day, Friday, the 9th of October, in Sydney at New South Wales Parliament House. And the proposition is not just the $50,000, it's actually being in that room. There's a large community of people who have rural and regional wellbeing at their heart, and they have all kinds of connections and networks. And so depending on your idea, pretty confident that we'll find people that can help kind of not just the money, but bring potentially some power to solving an issue and adding to a project in a pretty powerful way. And Jo, I think you've also kindly donated, if you're a finalist, you'll actually be receiving a complimentary, am I putting the right words in your mouth? Complimentary.
Yeah, you'll get 12 months membership to the Connection Table. We're offering that in for all the finalists as well. So regardless of whether if it's you guys or not that get in there, that you'll get to then hang with whoever are the recipients or the finalists as well. Now,
one other thing, is I'm just sort of seeing a note about a finalist on that page where you can apply. There's also a quick profile of all the finalists from last year.
Amazing.
That's what I should have mentioned that. Thank you. Yeah.
Amazing. That means we can't remember it exactly. So
yeah, no, that's great. Okay, yes, because we had a question here around wanting to hear about more of the finalists, so that's great. And like I said, I was lucky enough to be in the room last year and get to see like little videos and things on what they were working on. So again, some really interesting people and interesting projects. Kelly, I hope you watched this recording back. I know you rolled in late, but I feel this is right up your alley, so definitely have a look at this. If there is not any other questions for those of you dialing in live, actually just looking at the faces in the room, does it matter where the person is physically based? Can a metro-based person who
certainly can
positive,
and we would absolutely encourage. There's absolutely no basis for that you cannot be in the city. You can be in the city and absolutely run a project that has rural and regional communities at its heart.
Yeah,
that's you need to be Australian and you need to be, I think, a resident and 18 years older.
So not Australians based in Bangkok.
It's an interesting thing. I think if you're in Bangkok, you're an Australian resident living in Bangkok. I think, is that right?
Well, I'm not a tax resident, so maybe you need to have a look in your fine print.
We're still to be tested on some of our eligibility, right?
Yes, true. This is year 2. Maybe I should apply this year before you guys start getting too good with your rules. I think that it is just such an interesting. It's such an interesting fellowship that the scope is broad. That it is sort of all encompassing for that. For the positive impact in the regions. I do, as an outsider watching you, I think that education lens is a really good addition for this year, as far as because it was, I found when even just looking through the process last year, it was very broad and almost.
Yeah, that's. I think. Yeah, we learned a lot. It was a very, very, very broad funnel, and that was intentional. It was a real conversation about whether we go narrow. We decided to lay that broad, but certainly this little tweak around the education component, I think, brings it. It's still very open to a really good idea that, again, broadly, say it again, the education component is really about capability building. Could be in the community, could be in a workplace, could be at the pub.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's probably that answer there. So we've just had another question come in, which I feel could loop in on this. The True North example is a good one, as there are so many career navigation supports. So the question is how to still articulate a gap when it is possibly still the remit of an education system.
So I think that's an interesting observation. I think Annabelle had some lived experience that she was able to really clearly articulate the fact that it was patchy and the fact that she had some capability and some insight that she could apply in a different way. So she was able to articulate her solution and we understood the need. Look, so there's not often, new ideas are often a tweak on an old idea that might not have worked or whatever, right? So I would encourage people to kind of back themselves about thinking, okay, I've had a good idea, I've got it to this point, or it doesn't need to be brand new, but certainly there does need to be an articulation of how you're going to add value in that space, right?
Yeah.
And you've only, so the other part is it's not $500,000, it's $50,000 and that's a year. So what are you going to test, or what are you going to kind of try and, so there's an element of scoping that kind of effort in line with what the proposition is, I think. And I think we all need to be reasonable about that. We can't expect someone to automatically have a program that's going to reach 500,000 people with $50,000. Right?
Don't put limits on these things, Wendy.
Well, so I suppose
you're talking to the wrong people here.
It's true, right? So I know I'm talking to some amazing people, and look, hey, 500,000 online, that's true. So it's kind of Look, we have tried to leave things fairly broad, but a bit tighter than last year. We're certainly encouraging people to put their hat in the ring, and we really are looking forward to receiving applications.
I have one question that I know a lot of people will ask, and they're like, ask about the money, like the money part. I know that people don't have to submit a 20-page budget plan things. Is it a lump sum of 50 grand gets put in your bank account?
And you'll be asked to report on that quarterly. So you certainly will have some responsibility for being able to acquit on how you're spending things. I think broadly there's a budget that kind of is okay from this point, which is the beginning. I think I'm going to spend money in this kind of way. You're allowed to draw a wage, so there is certainly an element of recognising someone's effort and time.
Yep.
Some of this is in the actual guidelines, that people should have a good look at that. But we've tried to, I suppose, we understand that there is an iteration and there is partly a bit as you go. Sometimes people go, actually, I thought I'd do that bit, but I'm really going to do it here, not there, whatever. I think there's an element of wanting to keep people honest to some degree, but not tie them up in knots so that they cannot feel that they've got an ability to go, right, as I get to this, I'm not going to do it that way, I'm going to do it this way. It's called learning.
Yeah. And an investment in the individual recipients' professional development themselves, like if it is an education thing, if they need governance support, if they like those sorts of things, can they go and do the company director's course with some of the funds if it's going to be something like that?
No, we moved away. That there was a professional development element last year, and I think the addition of the education and then the winding back of, because that becomes quite the personal development rather than the project to benefit the community. Unless, I mean, there's no hard and fast rule to say no, but unless there's a real demonstration of how it's going to benefit
and how,
and
yeah. So I think this is where the impact. So it's actually not about investing in an individual, full stop.
Yeah.
It's about
how
investing.
You get the most, the return on investment. How you're touching as many people as possible with the funding,
and so it could be not so many, but deep capability built. So there's a mix there. We don't necessarily favour one or the other, but we want to actually see that someone's thought about that. It's not just about the individual at all. And those that actually put an application in that's framed around, I'm going to get this out of this, were not in the finalist zone at all.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Any other of you that are online at the moment, any last little questions? It sounds like you guys have got some very thorough resources and things on the website.
Hopefully, look, and we're still learning, so we're open to, if things are not like it's really okay. But what we've tried to do, I suppose, is allow some room for people to respond rather than us being so prescriptive that it kind of just ties us up in knots and there's no... And I can see there's some people on the call that I know, and I know they're good thinkers. They're people that can really think laterally and well. And so this is an opportunity to respond to something that you've probably been observing for some time in your community. You go, okay, hopefully we've got the right ingredients to get you moving.
Amazing.
We love an application from anyone who's on this call, because I know this is a community of doers and people that are smart and get stuff done. And that's who we want. We want people who are going to get shit done.
And I didn't pay them to say any of this, but
it's true.
This is our superpower, Wendy, of pulling together good crack doers in community.
Yeah. And we know that actually makes such a difference in the world, right? You can have an idea. If you don't do anything about it, just seriously be quiet.
100%.
Get on with it. I think that's partly the spirit of the organisation. So this Fischer Fellowship is kind of in line with that. So, yeah, I hope that's been a helpful session for everyone.
Very much so.
And thanks a lot for the opportunity. It's really great to...
I love this. I love that this will be a calendar invite every year for us.
Look, you know what? And, there's lots of opportunities. We end up having a fellow come and present on what they've managed to achieve. So it's not just
definitely.
That's further down the track.
definitely.
Yeah.
One other, just I'm putting you on the spot here, is there the ability for anyone who might want to attend the awards, if they can get to Sydney on the 9th of October and to sort of come along and support this? Is it a open free for all, or is it a...
It's certainly a long way from being free for all, given that it's at New South Wales Parliament House, and it's an event that that was the first time we had an event of its type. It brings together all our stakeholders, from grant recipients through to volunteers, through to people who've been donating for a long time, through to representatives across the social and government sector. So it's a really important event for us. And it's not to say that there may not be someone in this room who is going to be at that event, because I'll be there as a finalist. I think last year we certainly invited people who we knew we wanted to have in the room. We only had about 100 invitations. We are wanting to have a few more people in the room this year. So it depends a bit on, I think...
Look at those checkbooks, people. Open those checkbooks.
And no, it was an event it was a complimentary event. It was by invitation. So I don't know if I've been clear on my answer there. It's a bit of a grey.
Oh, it is. None of you are invited. We heard it loud and clear.
Yeah, you're invited if you're a finalist. So that the outcome of wanting to be there is put a really good application in.
There you go. That's the motivation right there. You want to be in that
room.
And
it's amazing. It is an amazing room. I think that's the other thing I just finished with, is that potentially the power of being kind of in the room and having, as a finalist, having access to some of the people that are also there. It's actually an opportunity state kind of fellowship. It's actually it's a little bit like, the classic, you get what out of the gym membership, what you put in. It's a little bit like that. It's the same probably as a membership connection table. It's that, what are you going to do with this opportunity? I think it's a really rich one, and we've had people who really get that, some finalists who really understood that last year. They've applied they're first in line to apply for this year. So we're not kind of saying, hey, if you've applied, you can't apply this year. We're certainly not at that point. And I mean, we had 200 applications last year. I don't think actually the number of applications is automatically a success metric, but I do know that we'd be really keen to attract applications from people who've got really good ideas.
Amazing.
Come on, Brooke. What you got?
Just one quick question. It just made me think, how many finalists are there out of interest? Do you guys whittle it down to?
Had 5 finalists and a recipient. Look, hey, don't hold us to it.
Okay. No worries.
I think probably we'll have about the same, but
yeah.
I don't imagine we'll have any more than that to be able to answer that question quite sensibly. Yeah.
No, good to know.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Wendy, so don't start throwing numbers around that you may then change your mind.
Right? Careful.
Thank you again, Wendy and Lisa. It is great to see your faces, and I'm really excited to sort of see what this looks like round 2. I'm really thrilled to have had you here again and to talk more about it. And I saw lots of nodding while you were talking. So for those people that have dialed in, and thank you for all of the great questions that came through in the chat as well. But I will put links to all of the bits and pieces in with this recording. And if you're happy to have your contact, can I stick your email in there, Wendy, as well, if people have got any questions? That
CFCO is the one that we're using for this, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You send me what you want me to put there. And
sure, I'll do that now. Yeah, great. And thanks, everyone, for making the time to come and be part of the conversation. Appreciate it very much.
That's awesome. Thanks again.
Thank you.
See you later. Thank you.